All right, this is the weekly 30-year U.S. Treasury bond letter September contract for the week of Monday, June 3rd. In fact, you see this chart here. Let me throw the newsletter in there as well. It's the same chart exactly. Let me bump some of these levels up. And you can see 154.13. That's an intermediate channel structure. I've reduced it to weekly containment. Just because we're pushing onto new highs, it can contain weekly highs. And in fact, once we test it, 148.14 attainable within several weeks, possibly. Although, given the upward momentum here, I wouldn't be surprised to see the market push through this area in the coming days or the next week or so. In fact, if we close a day above 154.13, you should expect 155.16 within the week. And if things really get moving, in other words, if the stock market continues to weaken and sell off significantly, a daily settlement above 154.13 early in the week just might yield that 157.14 formation by Friday's close. That is a real possibility. If you can just take a look at, if you added another bar like last week to the coming week, 157.14 is not out of the question. Now 157.14, let me show you actually on the charts itself. Let me take a look at what we've got here. Here we are. All right, this is big picture here. This is the weekly continuation chart. This is the volume-based rollover. So there's your 157.14 formation that I showed you in just the previous slide. If we closed above this, and I don't see that happening at the end of this week, but it is certainly possible. If that were to occur, then our next significant resistance area, which is actually very significant, it starts in 159.26, 159.23 to 160.14. That's a combination speed line channel top. This is a significant area. This is annual containment material, if you will. In other words, it can contain buying through the balance of the year. It's also a significant upside continuation point into later year. I'll talk about what those targets would be if we were to come close to this area in the coming weeks. But for right now, 157.14 should be considered in reach now over the next, number of weeks. Let's go back to the newsletter itself. If we were to close, above, as I mentioned, 154.13 on a day basis early in the week, we just might reach 157.14 by Friday's close. But, this 154.13, it can contain weekly highs. And once we test it, 152.05 in reach within 3 to 5 days. And as I mentioned earlier, 148.14 within several weeks. I'll show you that in a moment. But if we closed above 154.13, expect 157.14 within a full week of trade, 2 at the most. And so that's the way I would put this now. If you're talking big picture, I think you should assume 157.14 is likely. And once again, it is the start of a narrowing range of resistance up to 160.14. This area all comes together by early July when everything is in the 160 handle. So keep that in mind. Let's talk downside here for the week ahead. Here we go. There's the 152.05, that I showed you on the chart. This is kind of a multi-session containment level. It's a 2-star level. So if we test it like Wednesday or Thursday, it could contain selling through the balance of the week. And just know that holding below 154.13 does allow 148.14 over the next several weeks. And that becomes actually pretty clear if we close below 152.05. That would then be in reach within, say a full week of trade. So 152.05 is nothing more than a trend line across these tops. If we close below it, this 148.14 is an ascending speed line. And it actually can contain weekly selling pressures in possibly into July trade. It's also a meaningful downside pivot point into July. So I'm not expecting it this week, certainly not, but if by the end of the week we close below 148.14, that would signal a good June high. The next 3 to 5 weeks then expected to continue south into the 142 handle. So 148.14 is essentially, let's go back to the newsletter itself, it is your base of support into July. I don't see us testing it anytime soon, but if we close below 152.05, then it actually becomes an indicator, it becomes signaled below 152.05. So let's kind of talk the week itself. Kind of a two-sided framework, really, between 152.05 and 154.13. 154.13 can contain weekly highs, below which 152.05 in reach this week, and quite possibly that 148.14 level I showed you a moment ago within several weeks. On the other hand, respect the strength of this market right now, and closing above 154.13 is certainly in the cards here over the next week or two, and if so this week, then a bullish continuation into that 157 to 160 handle, and then expected within a week or two. And this is a big area here. I actually think the market probably wants to push into this area. You've got this old high at 158.09. I think if you're a big picture trader, this should be allowed. I don't think you should play the short side aggressively until we get into the 158 to 160 handles. All right. I do believe that that's all I've got to say for this week. Yeah. If you have any questions at all, give me a buzz. Otherwise, I'm going to call that the weekly 30-year video.